This video contains 9 minutes of excerpts from our longer 1-hour download or DVD video on Seipai history and bunkai. We hope you enjoy the content.
So I'm here in Naha in Okinawa, and this is actually Shuri Castle behind me here, which is the center part of Shuri Castle, the major castle in the capital, Okinawa. Part of what I'm doing here in Okinawa is to do some research on Seipai, the kata. As you may know, the kata comes from China originally, and in the late 1800s, Higashiyama sensei moved that kata over to Okinawa. At about the same time, or it was the same time, as he moved a collection of kata across, such as Seienshin, Sanshin, Sansei-ru, etc. They're all part of the one family. Here is where the kata really developed in Okinawa and became consolidated with the name Seipai, if you like. The kanji behind Seipai is simply the two kanji for 10 and 8, meaning 18. Often you see it written with the kanji tei, as is karate do abilities, as being 18 applications exist within the kata. And if you walk your way through the kata, there are approximately that many applications or bunkai. Sometimes you see the kanji written with the character hito, or person, after it, and standing for 18 people, or potentially 18 warriors, is another translation. Finally, 18 has a significant connection to Buddhism, as do a number of other numbers that kata are here, of course, developed under such sensei as Chojo Miyagi, Mabuni Kenwa, and Higashiyama sensei originally. It then moved up to Japan. In its early movement to Japan, that was primarily through Mabuni Kenwa, who founded Shito-ru. In particular, different ways that the kata is done at a given point. So that is, Goju has a way of doing it, Shito-ru has a way of doing it, Kyokushin has a way of doing it, Uechi-ru has a way. So all of these styles have their own particular ways. And I'll show a couple of variants of the kata and discuss motion variants. So the tape is very much style irrelevant. We're focusing on the core embossing or pattern of the kata, not the superficial differences. And the bunkai is always going to be the same, given that Seipai is highly conserved across all of these styles. However, the way one style might do it over another gives a different bunkai possibility, or alludes much more to one than another, if you're looking for that form to match function equation. When you do the third one we'll look at is Mabuni Kenwa doing it himself from a series of stills that look at each motion within the kata Seipai. What really matters, though, as always, when we talk about kata, is not the kata form and the minor differences between styles or approach. It is the underlying bunkai that's the key message and the most important thing to get right. And further to that, I love the Mabuni 1930s text, which focuses in on the idea that fewer kata is better in one's karate journey. That you're far better off learning a few kata to a high level of depth than knowing a lot of kata, where essentially your knowledge becomes superficial. This was the philosophy I was taught in the Kansai region in Japan by Sotokawa and Iba sensei. And one can decide to try and know 10 different bunkai for a given move in a kata, but how good will you be at any one of them? So again, I like to encourage my students and myself to really focus in on 1 or 2 bunkai and become very proficient in terms of speed and power. I do believe it's important to know the classical and historical meanings of the bunkai and kata, and therefore the message in a given kata. But modern times have shown, and the statistical analysis we've done of street fighting and grappling and other things has shown that sometimes these moves are not always the most practical. So while we want to understand those classical origins, we often do make sure that as a secondary backup we practice a bunkai that the modern data and the modern different cross-training that's occurred allows us to be practicing something that's real for our body type, sex, and likely scenario, which is something we talk about more throughout this video.
Seipai!
up there. Why might you use shikodachi in a stance to the opening move? If I trap that hand and then use my body weight to come back, I weaken her position. There. Having now discussed the mismatch of much of karate's interpretation on arm bars relative to the statistics of street injuries, the MMA environment, and expert grapplers' opinions, let's look at the classical interpretation of the Seipai armbar, putting the data aside for a moment. If I don't do that slap, 1, 2, I grab, and I just do this, and I get here, I've got to fight this arm to turn that all the way around and get that. He's not going to cooperate. And plus that hand's poised, ready to hit me. Right, so it's a classic example where you're not seeing, maybe it's not obvious in the kata, that you would bridge, pull down, impact. See how the hand's already turned for myself here? So now when I get there, it's all set up the way I like it, to break the arm. Then from there, throw this over, turn on a dime, compress as you do so. I might put my hand up there, still holding him, then impact to the groin. So I've got control over my opponent the entire time, working both arms. Don't waste motions. If you're zipping by a face, hit them on the way. Another point to add on this part of the kata is in the turn, if the person's much taller than you, the arm break's essentially impossible. One way around this is to drop their height by impacting the back of the knee as you turn. We'll show a clip here out of my 7th degree black belt test, where I was working with Sensei Nick Lukic, who's about 6'3". Alright, I'd just like to talk about the midsection of the kata, and specifically kakeuke, and one version that I've settled in on over the years. That is to have the kakeuke high and my palms more flat. Firstly, it addresses the statistics and probability of the street around the head blows and protecting the head. And we'll get to that in the bunkai in a moment. This is versus the versions where you see the hand pulling quite low. Comes up for me, down, up, in for the next chewed arm, my geri, uppercut. That's the section of the kata we're referring to. The origins of me doing this high, I first saw it in 1986 at the World Karate Championships under the banner of WUKO, which today is called WKF. The individual doing it, turning and having this foot become more straight, allows for an easy kick. If you remain in Sanshindachi with that right ankle foot and the tension on the knee that is there, it's very difficult to get a smooth kick. So that last opening, for me, really assists a nice